Hello everybody. Today I was expecting to make a video on all of the fancy new features that have come out in the 1.21 update since I've now updated my world. However, Mojang has a funny way of giving you some side missions when you least expect it, and they're up to their old tricks once again, as it seems like they just cannot stop themselves from adding new spawn chunk features to this game in every recent update, and they've done it again. Now, I have to admit, this one is actually a pretty good update. It makes it so that you can change the size of the spawn chunks using commands, which is super useful, although it doesn't really apply to this world. But alongside that, they've also changed the size of them once again. So that means that my mob switch, which technically is still working, has now been left redundant as it's no longer within the spawn chunks. So today I'd like to fix that up and get it working again. Firstly, I've created a little demonstration here to show my viewers what's happening with the spawn chunks at the moment, as I remember when I first looked into it all those years ago, I found it really confusing, and since they've just changed it again, I'm sure this would be useful information for anybody. But pretty much the way it works is that your center spawn block point, which you either manually set yourself or the game will set somewhere roughly around 0, which is usually like a 2x2, whatever chunk that's in would be this center one right here, and then the spawn chunks extend out in a square with different features the further and further away you get from it to kind of save on memory and how much storage your world uses, etc. So this 3x3 in the center here loads everything, which is nice, but then once you get one chunk further out, it will stop loading entities, so things like mobs and that aren't going to get processed, and then it will start doing the same for redstone. So if you have any kind of farm out here or some kind of automated system, if it isn't loaded, it's just not going to work until finally absolutely nothing gets loaded. But I think the chunks still get loaded in this layer. And you can see I've created a kind of visual demonstration of where my spawn chunk mob switch will have to be. So it will switch between the two of these, unloading it and loading it per my need, which will enable and disable mob spawning in my world. So I just need to move my one, which is kind of roughly out here, a little bit closer to where my 0 is in my case. Now that is a little bit easier said than done, since my current mob switch is over there on my starter island, just in the basement right now, which is pretty far away, but 0 is actually right here in the ocean, which means that the farm needs to be a couple chunks sort of roughly out in this area, which as you can see is all water right now. So my idea to get around this is actually to create a ship and then put the mob switch inside of that. Now of course I could always just build this thing underground or throw it in the sky somewhere. However, I always liked how it was originally located under my starter house and it had its own little dedicated build to it. So I think it'd be nice to sort of follow the tradition and give this thing the glory it deserves, so that there's a more elegant solution to the mob spawning in my world. And whenever I show off the mob switch, I can show off this beautiful ship as well. So let's get building, and then I'll show you how I managed to incorporate it into this build. Before I even started construction of the ship, I decided to drain a section of the ocean. This would make building the hull much easier, and the way I went around doing this was I decided to actually drop all of the sand on top of some hanging signs, which are all attached to one block, making it so that I can just break a single block to get rid of the entire lot of it when I'm done with it. It's the classic trapping method. And then what I did is I placed kelp underneath all of the sand, so that once it dropped, it'd all break into block form for me, and it just made the whole process a lot more streamlined. And so once I'd placed in the different rows that I needed, I used my sponge to clear out all of the water, and I was able to start building this ship. Now if you're interested in getting your hands on a schematic and also a world download of this build, it will be available in the description. Alright, well check it out, we now have the very first ship sailing our seas in this world. And my word, do I absolutely love this thing. This turned out so much better than I was anticipating. I never even expected to build a ship this early on in my world, as I was expecting to do it for the city or something, but I just designed this thing on the spot and I am completely in love with it. So I want to give you guys a full tour of all of the details here and even go over some of the new textures that I'm using to make up the little details that I've incorporated into this thing. So I think it's fitting that we start from top to bottom here. Of course we have these really large sails, and I actually really love these because I came up with the idea to use the mushroom stem block. I was looking for an off-white colour, as of course sails are kind of traditionally white, but they're never really that clean if it's not a brand new ship. And this coincidentally, not only was it off-white, but it was in that perfect wavy texture which you'd kind of expect kind of sheets or cloth to look like. So this was kind of a massive win for me. It gave me everything I wanted. Unfortunately, we don't get stair and slab variants, but because they're pretty large, you can still get quite a bit of shape out of them. And so I was really happy with how that turned out. The rest of it is quite simply your kind of oak logs, and the fences here to represent string. But I have one more block that I've used to represent the string. Now these are the new copper grates that have been released. There's a lot of variants, and of course because you get the waxed and the unwaxed versions, you actually get duplicates. And so what I did with one of the duplicates is I transformed it into a wooden frame. This is very, very similar, if not identical, to my custom stained glass that I have. The only difference is I removed everything from on the inside, and from a distance it makes a pretty convincing sort of thinner rope or string which helps put this thing together, and I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Finally, on the very top, the last detail that I have up here is of course the flags. Now these are pretty cool because they're designed to look like they're just roughed up in the weather and they're kind of a little bit shredded. I didn't want to go for anything too vibrant, so I went for yellow, which almost blends in but it just stands out enough. And for this I've used as many different blocks in that colour that I could think of. So I've got some glazed terracotta, that's a beehive there, lots of details like the buttons, signs and candles and things. But then I've also incorporated some muted colours like the birch, and this is actually one of my custom carpets that's designed to look like straw, just to give it that variation. And yeah, they're both identical. I really like these up here. So let's jump down onto the deck to take a look at all the details on here. Now on here we have this, which is traditionally a kind of a trapdoor that enables you to move things and lower them into the sort of lower decks of the ship. Unfortunately, this is where my mob switch is located, so I wasn't able to fully create that detail. It's also why some of the interior details are a little bit twisted down there, which we'll take a look at shortly. But I got around it by just placing the black concrete directly underneath, so it looks dark and you can kind of just get a glimpse of what might be down there, if that makes sense. Now another detail we have up here is the cannons. So in total there's 6 cannons, and you can see them poking out the sides here. I used the walls for the actual cannon itself in the deep slate block here. I think this works pretty well. It's a nice grey block that has a bit of kind of metallic-ish texture to it. And the ones on these sides here are all identical, but over on this side where I had the steps going up to the back of the ship, I didn't really have enough space, but I still really wanted to have a cannon in there, so I created a slightly smaller one. And just next to it you can actually see I've got a barrel of gunpowder. I finally got a use for this custom texture which I created ages ago, so you can sort of find there's a couple more around here. I like this detail, which of course is what you would use for these cannons here. But then of course there's a few more little details like the crates that I like to just throw everywhere. I try not to place too many around here because I didn't want it to look kind of unrealistically messy. I don't think people would usually just throw loads of stuff up here. But I have a few more barrels on this side, and then these are some more retextured grates. These are designed to look like something like crab cages that you would use for fishing. And I also have a few of these hanging on the edges just outside here as well, where perhaps they might be in use right now. Now if you're wondering what these textures are, these are actually another feature to my texture pack, where some of the plant pots have custom textures so that I can add more details. Some people seem to think that that's mods, but it's actually just the beauty of having your own resource pack. Now before we head inside, let's just quickly jump up to the back of the deck here, where you can see that I've got my single little ship steering wheel. Didn't really know where to put this, didn't have a lot of opportunities because of scale and things. But I think this new trapdoor here, a copper one, just about does the trick, and it's good enough for me. And then of course on the very front you can also walk up here, but there's not a lot of detail. I suppose you could walk all the way up to the front of the ship if you like, and kind of see how it's all constructed here using the gates to represent the string. Ooh. Actually, while we're down here I can show you another detail, which is on the front of the ship I have some anchors. This is a fun little design using the anvil there, I really like. Again, using the polished deep slate because it's a nice grey colour. And yeah, I have one on this side and I do have another one on this side. I'm not sure how realistic it is to have two, but I liked how it looked, so I wanted it to look good from both angles, depending on how you was looking at it. Alright then, so let's explore the interior. We start off here with the kind of captain's quarters. Unfortunately, it's quite small, however I did my best. So we've got a little sleeping area, we've got a clock on the wall, a little sitting area, and then here I'm kind of just making do with the interiors that I'm left with as a result of kind of making the exterior look nice. So it's a bit of a jumble of blocks, but you've got your kind of standard little details that you might expect to find. I really like this room because of the windows back here actually, but beyond that it's pretty simple, and that's about as much as I was able to do. We did have some space limitations when it comes to the rest, however there was a lot more I was able to do, so I'm really excited to show you what we've got going on down here. So as we first come down, you'll find that I do have another spare anchor sitting in this little lowered section, but I'd say the main detail to this section of the deck, or the lower deck here, is the little prison cells. So you can see we've got some poor guy that was left in there a long time ago, and these are kind of just the retextured, I think it's the acacia doors and trapdoors that I'm using. Actually, these doors I think it's either cherry or crimson, and it makes for a nice sort of prison cell look. And on the inside I'm actually using iron bars to separate it out once again. So I'm pretty happy with this. The rest of the floor is just a little bit of storage. It's mostly quite simple, but I've got my new carpet texture here, which I've recently introduced. This updates based on how you place them, which is really, really awesome. And this is just one of many colors I've created. If you're interested in seeing more of these, I posted an update of this and there will be more of them in the future on my Discord. So you can check that out if you're interested in that kind of thing. We also have the kitchen down here, but first we're actually going to move our way around to this side, as the first thing I'd like to show you is the sleeping quarters. So this little room in here has 4 beds, and we've got all the usual little bits like the little bedside cabinets here. We've got an armour stand with some clothes and some candles. It's pretty compact and cozy, but these places usually are, so I'm pretty happy with this. I like it. It's got a nice little vibe about it. And once we move just past it, we get to another semi sort of communal area. So this is actually where all of the food is stored in some barrels. Now, I'm not quite sure it would be stored like this, but we want to kind of visually represent it. So here I'm kind of exposing it so that you can see that this is what's being stored here. And we've got some meats and potatoes and different vegetables and things. But just down here in the lowered section, we have a little eating area. So this is where everyone could sit around a table. See, I've got some watermelon on there and eat the food, which is appropriately next to where all the food is stored, but also directly next to the small kitchen. So this is a very compact little kitchen, but it gets the job done. You can see we've got a little sink in here, some utensils, and the odd bit of storage. And I even managed to squeeze in a little bit of stone flooring there. This is actually the double slab variant of polished andesite, so I can get the brick texture. It's the first time I've used it, I think, and I'm really happy with how that looks. And down through here, we just have a few more bits like this brush and the utensils once again, but this just squeezes around the staircase and comes through this door, which is once again where the kitchen is. Now, the reason we find ourselves squeezing around this staircase, and the reason that we've got the backs of pistons here to use as textures, and of course because of the elephant in the room, is the fact that we have the mob switch back here. So if I just flip up these trapdoors, you can in fact see that this is the good old mob switch that's been crammed inside. Right now I haven't got any of the mobs inside, but it's fully functional, and the way we operate it is actually from below. So what we have to do is jump out of the ship and then swim all the way underneath to where you can see I've got this little pocket of air, and this is where the lever is. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to move around, but I can flick that and you can just about hear it change everything. So if you want to use it, you can still access it, which is nice. It's just a little bit quirky now. So that pretty much does it for these details. The main thing I want to do now is just focus on getting those mobs in there so that I can call this project done, as I'm pretty tired of having to worry about all the mobs spawning at night. Now one thing that I've been doing lately is manually collecting up some nether warts here in this temporary little farm that I created so that I can create some red nether brick, as another new addition to this resource pack is that one of the new trapdoors, which again we have duplicates of, I've actually transformed into a different variant of my roof texture. So this is the same as my sort of red castle roof, however this is a brown one which is a little bit more applicable to various different builds that I would have. And so what I've also done is transform the red nether brick into this texture as well, so that I can get the full palette and use it to create my different roofs. So I'm just crafting up some of these so that I can now actually incorporate this into one of my builds. But otherwise that's the final project I have planned for today's video. Hopefully by the next video we'll actually be able to explore even more of the new features that this update provides, as there's a lot more things that I want to go over that I've already started in preparation for even making this video, such as exploring all of those new structures and blocks that this update has provided.